One of the leading campaigners for commercial radio in Britain was John Whitney, a man whose career had already embraced making recordings of church bells, which he then sold to the bell ringers, founding Radio Antilles, and striking the original deal with London Weekend Television for the drama series Upstairs Downstairs. He takes up the story.
Yes, it started in about 1966 when a group of us, John Bolting, Roy Bolting, John Gorst, who's now MP for North Finchley, decided it was time that we really got cracking with the concept of commercial radio. We felt the BBC had been there for some 50 years in sound, and it was time to bring a bit of competition in. So we founded the local radio association, and I remember the first meeting was in the Café de Paris, and we announced it in the Times, and people turned up, and it became real. And I was elected chairman, partly because I voted myself as chairman.
What did it do, and what sort of response did you get from government and the BBC?
Well, a rather cool one, I suppose, is the diplomatic way of responding to the question. I recall we had a frequency plan, which Marconi did for us, which showed that we could put up to some 70 stations, low-powered, medium-wave stations. And I took this in a little booklet we'd prepared to the then Postmaster General, Edward Short, in his palatial offices in Westminster, across from Waterloo Bridge. And I remember being ushered in those days, in '66, by what I thought were flunkies, genuine flunkies, with blue jackets and lots of buttons on them. So that was pretty daunting. And I went through the most massive doors, I recall, to see the great man himself. And I produced my book, and I said I wanted to start commercial radio in this country. And he said, "No, you won't." And I hoped there would be a little more dialogue to demonstrate that there was interest. And he said, "Is that all?" And I said, "Well, that is all we want, yes, sir," I added as a balancing medium. That was it. He said, "Well, we have no intention whatsoever of bringing in commercial radio into this country." And one of these gentlemen with the buttons showed me the door. So that actually only increased my figure to resolve the matter in our favour. And after that we started some real campaigning, because one could see then that there was an implacable resistance against the introduction of competition, and we went from there.
Did you win the argument only after 1970, when a Conservative government came to power?
I think, recalling it, yes. The Conservative party was very in favour of it, and there were several MPs, Conservative MPs, who were lobbying for it in Parliament. But it wasn't until the Conservative Party won power that we were able to put our then dream into real focus.
Now, in the fullness of time, of course, you became the managing director of Capital Radio in 1973 when it started, and I noticed that you list looking at sunrises in Who's Who as one of your recreations. So in that year you presided over one. Can you just tell us what you were trying to do with Capital in terms of its programmes? I mean, other than run, of course, a profit-making company, what your hopes were with Capital when you began that in 1973?
Well, actually, not to be too facetious, but my first hope was to get into my office, because we had a rather magnificent staircase which had been built in the Euston Road, which was a Busby Berkeley type staircase, and it wasn't there when we started, so I had to try and climb up a ladder to my office each morning in the early days, which caused me some heartache, I must say. But no, what we wanted to do when we started, what I profoundly believed was a role for radio, and still do, is a total involvement with its listener in the area within which it broadcasts. And we set up Capital Radio with the really major objective of talking with, not to, or at, Londoners. We were described by the then IBA, which had just become the Independent Broadcasting Authority as opposed to the ITA, we were described as the general and entertainment station. And we took that remit very seriously.
But there was already local radio, of course, which the BBC had been providing for 6 or 7 years.
Yes, the BBC didn't put bells and whistles on it, and it needed to reach out to people who normally didn't feel that the BBC spoke, as it were, to their condition. We did.